With you having permission to color while I preach, I feel somewhat that I have a free pass. Only half of you are really going to be paying attention anyway. We live in a world of contradictions, and maybe none greater than the disconnect or contradiction of this week. For on Thursday, many of us will gather around tables with family or with friends and enjoy a good Thanksgiving meal. And when we gather together, many of us will take part in that sacred ritual of before digging into the turkey and mashed potatoes, we'll go around the table and ask the question, what are you thankful for? And answer it one by one. And then some of us, at least, will the next day be out shopping and grabbing stuff at a great deal. In fact, if you were born in the 1900s, as I was, and some of you weren't, but most of you were, you remember the days when to partake in those deals, you had to actually leave your house and go to the store, oftentimes at ridiculously early hours. I can still remember seeing people line up the night before in order to be the first ones in the store at 3 a.m. when it opened for the early bird specials. I remember my friends talking about it, and I remember people in my life packing a tent, warm clothes, hot chocolate, and going at 8 p.m. to sit in front of the store. And every year, without fail, there would be stories from somewhere in America where someone would have gotten seriously injured because they were at the front of the line as hundreds of people tried to get into the store at the same time. And these same people, not 12 or 24 hours before, were spending time saying thank you for the good things in their lives, would be running over people in their mad dash to get the $500 off that big screen TV. Clearly, there is a disconnect. And that disconnect still happens today. Study after study will tell you that gratitude, the practice of gratitude, is good for us. And yet, every time we turn around, we see evidence of people in our world living their lives dissatisfied, discontent, and out of an ungrateful spirit. Why? Why is that the case? Why is there this contradiction? As I reflected on it this week, here are 3 reasons that I came up with. Certainly there's more. 1, we are too busy. In a world that constantly pushes us to hurry from one thing to the next, it makes it hard to see the small gifts that come our way each and every day. Because we're always in a hurry, always moving, just too busy, and as a result, we are inattentive people. Not only are we too busy, but we are too focused on ourselves. When everything around us is about my needs or my desires or my feelings or my dreams, and everything that I accomplish is because of my strength and because of my effort and my gifts, it becomes hard to practice gratitude for anyone or anything other than yourself. We live in a culture that pushes us to be narcissists. Not only are we too busy, not only are we too focused on ourselves, but we also, time and again, are pushed in our culture to desire more. For whatever reason, we have come to believe, and this culture has it so ingrained in us, that more or new is always better. And so we're always grabbing, always desiring more stuff, more followers, more money, more popularity, more, never content, always lacking, always needing more. In other words, not only are we inattentive people, and not only does our culture often push us to be narcissistic people, but we are also greedy people. And living life this way is a recipe for an unsatisfied life. When we are too busy, too focused on ourselves, and always wanting more, it's the perfect recipe for an unsatisfied life. And the funny thing is, what do we naturally do when we are dissatisfied? Well, we do more, we focus on ourselves, and we pull out our credit card and do some therapy shopping, which just puts us in a cycle of dissatisfaction. And maybe that is why the prayer of thanksgiving has so much power to be transformative for our lives. As we've gone through our on prayer, we began with the prayer of praise or adoration, praying the qualities of God, focusing and magnifying who God is to fill our field of vision and give us a rock and a place from which to navigate through life. Then we talked about the prayer of confession, being open and honest with our emotions and all our feelings, and yes, our failings. And then last week we talked about prayer as silence and just being with God, creating space to listen for the voice of God in our lives. This week in the prayer of thanksgiving, we're not so much focusing on who God is, so much as what God does. Recognizing God as the ultimate source of every good thing that comes our way. And we see it time and time again throughout the Psalms. Psalm 75, we give thanks to you, O God. People tell of your wondrous deeds. Psalm 92, declare your steadfast love in the morning and your faithfulness by night, creating this rhythm at the beginning of the day and at the ending of the day, turning your attention to be grateful for what God has done. Psalm 103, bless the Lord, O my soul. Don't forget God's benefits or the good things that come our way. God forgives, God heals, God redeems, God crowns you with mercy and love. And then maybe my favorite line from that psalm says, God satisfies you with good as long as you live. How many of us go through our day-to-day lives with that idea, that proclamation at the forefront of our hearts? Satisfied in the good things of God as long as you live. I know I don't, but I wonder how much each and every one of our lives would be different if we did. And so as we've asked every week, what happens when we practice this prayer of gratitude? When we practice gratitude in prayer, what happens as we do it? In her book, The Gift of Wonder, Creative Practices for Delighting in God, Christine Arani-Sign calls gratitude the ultimate enabler, enabling us to push past all that dissatisfaction, all that discontentment, to thrive in the life that God has for us. And so what does this prayer of gratitude enable us to do? 3 things. First, it enables us to pay attention to life's many gifts. Do this with me. Take a second and just take a deep breath. That breath was a gift. And it's a gift that not everyone receives. For in the time that it took us to take that deep breath, on average, 4 people took their last. In the 20 minutes that I'll be preaching, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 will breathe their last. And I say that not to be morbid, but so that we have perspective, to recognize this. Each breath is a gift. Each moment is a gift. And when we recognize it as such, we are more likely to live each moment and each breath to its fullest. Intentionally taking that time to slow down allows us the space to pay attention to the many gifts around us all the time. As some of you may know, one of my favorite theologians and conversation partners through his writings is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. This week, a movie actually came out about him and his life. I know some in this church have already gone to see it. I've read and heard some mixed reviews, so I'm not saying, hey, go see this movie necessarily. But in realizing that this movie was coming out, it made me desire to read more of Bonhoeffer. And so I grabbed his book, Letters and Papers from Prison. It's a collection of letters that were written between him and his family and those he cared about during his time in prison in the 1940s. I've always wanted to read it cover to cover, and so far I've only read bits and pieces. So I started at the beginning. And the first letter that Bonhoeffer writes his family is from April of 1943. And he gets to the end of the letter and he says this: "Here in the prison yard, there is a thrush which sings beautifully in the morning, and now in the evening too. One is grateful for the little things, and that is surely a gain." Now I have no clue if Bonhoeffer lived his life with that sort of awareness and appreciation for the little things. But there he was in prison being questioned by the Nazis in 1943. And because of this opportunity to be bored and not have a lot to do, he was able to pay attention to some of the little things. Like a bird singing in the prison yard in the morning and the evening. And realizing how grateful he could be for those little things. And when you see those little things and are grateful for them, it's actually a gain in your life. There are so many little gifts each and every day. A clear night sky with the stars shining bright. A roof overhead, a gentle breeze on a summer day. The noise of kids running through the house. Or even in worship. Are we paying attention? When we intentionally practice gratitude, it allows us, even for just a moment, to pay attention to the little things. Be grateful for them, for that is surely a gain. Not only does it enable us to pay attention, but gratitude enables us to recognize just how good and generous God is. When we take those moments to be intentional in prayer to say thank you, we open our eyes to the blessings that God gives, on just how much God satisfies our lives with good as long as we live. For some of us, we've grown to see God as stingy, God as one who keeps good things from us, maybe a God who's out to get us for our mistakes or missteps or failings. But when we take time to step back and practice gratitude, it enables us to see the good and generous God who really is. On the other hand, oftentimes when we have good things come our way, we like to turn that back on ourselves as if we were the source of it, as if it was our strength, as if it was our ingenuity, as if it was our own ability that caused it. And this impulse is not new. In fact, Moses, as the Israelite people are about to enter into the land that God had shown them, in Deuteronomy chapter 8 says this: "Do not say to yourself, my power and my own hand have gotten me this wealth. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, so that he may confirm his covenant he made to your ancestors." This impulse to turn all the good things as being ultimately sourced in ourselves, Moses recognized. Said, one day you're going to be a thriving people. And when you get there, don't forget who gave you the strength in order to work, who gave you the health in order to have a long life and continue to gain. We are really good at thinking more of ourselves than we ought to. But even when we have worked hard to gain what we have, it is only possible out of the goodness and generosity of God. Practicing gratitude enables us to see all of the goodness and generosity God gives. Third, practicing gratitude enables us to open ourselves up to contentment. For the path of contentment, or having a peaceful and joyful satisfaction with life, runs through the doorway of gratitude. Instead of running people over in the store to get that TV at a steep discount, those who intentionally practice gratitude reframe their lives around the awareness that, especially here in America, we almost always have far more than we need. And I don't think it is accidental that the most content and the most generous people that I have met in my life are those who don't have much. In fact, for me, it is the people I met in the Dominican Republic when I took a group of teens and adults at my former church. We were there, and so many of them lived in these concrete homes that were no bigger than my office, with an entire family and maybe even multiple generations living there. Many of them did not have access to running water. And those who did, that running water was not safe to drink. In fact, it was there that I first became acquainted with bucket showers, because the water, even in those homes that did have running water, did not always flow. And so when the water was flowing, they would fill up these buckets in the bathrooms, so that the time when water wasn't flowing, you would still be able to shower by dipping a pitcher into this bucket and pouring it over your head. But I got to tell you, they were the most grateful, most content, and most generous people I think I've ever met in my life. They were grateful for what they had, and when they received, they never took it for granted. Practicing gratitude enables us to pay attention, to recognize God's goodness and generosity, and opens the doorway to contentment with life. I wonder, when in your life did you feel the most grateful? When was that for you? Obviously, I don't know your stories. I would love to hear them, but here's mine. The time I was overwhelmed with the most gratitude was Thanksgiving Day in 2022. My family and I, we had taken a trip to Disney World, and we spent the day of Thanksgiving going from ride to ride, enjoying time together, the expensive food inside Disney World. And we got to the end of the night, and we gathered together in front of Cinderella's castle to watch the show that happens every night. And we were there inches away from the people all around us. Louis, being 7 years old, I was holding him so that he could see above the crowd. Otherwise, he would not be able to. And we watched the fireworks, the laser light show that was cast onto the castle, the Disney music blaring from the loudspeakers, and when the time came, Tinkerbell ziplining from the top of the castle over all of our heads. It is quite a sight to be seen. But somewhere in the middle of that, I just took a moment, looked around at my family, and especially the face of my son who I was holding. And the wonder in his eyes, the look of joy and excitement at what was happening, just filled up within me just this gratitude. And all I could say in that moment, and I remember doing so, thank you, God. Thank you for this moment with my family. Now, certainly Disney has a special magic to it. If you've ever been there, you know what I mean. But I can't help but wonder that maybe, just maybe, the only thing keeping us from living that type of life or experiencing that type of gratitude day to day is that we fail to pay attention. And because we fail to pay attention, we don't recognize all of the small things of God's goodness and generosity each and every day. Because of that, we don't walk the path of contentment. Practicing gratitude, saying thank you, helps us reconnect to that magic that is embedded in the very fabric of the universe. For God satisfies you with good as long as you live. I hope this week that as you turn to Thanksgiving and intentionally practice gratitude this week and say thank you, that you pay attention. Recognize God's goodness. Experience the contentment that comes from a life that is fully aware of God's activity in and around us. May you be satisfied in the goodness of God.